This is The Extra Mile.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Extra Mile. Caleb Spear along with
G5.
the usual. We have been talking a lot about communication the last few podcasts.
That's right. Communication with others, communication with God, and our prayer life. Those last two episodes, I think, have been really good in this idea of communication because we just need to have more conversations with people.
Yes, and that theme is going to continue into this episode where we're going to talk about our communication when it comes to social media. We might be 2 years too late because it is. I can't believe it's April 1st. Happy April Fool's Day. Well, I guess you're not listening on April Fool's Day, so April Fool's to you, I guess. Does anyone even do anything for April Fool's anymore?
I don't think I don't hear much anything.
I remember in preschool, our teacher got us what am I 5? And it was kind of scary actually. It was like a dried red plastic substance that looked like paint with a brush, and we would do painting activities as preschool. And she had it folded over on the keyboard of the computers, and she was like, "Who did this?" We're really young, and I was like, "Oh no, who did it?" And she's like, April Fools," and held it the whole time.
Psych. Now let's do some math while adrenaline's up high.
Anyway, it's no joke. We're actually going to talk about communication on social media.
That's right.
George, why don't you kick us off?
So, communication on social media. I mean, let's look at some of these stats here because we kind of wanted to dive into this idea before we go into our perception of how we're perceiving ourselves on social media and really anywhere else.
And others.
Yeah, and others. We want to look at some of the stats. How long are we spending, our time on these places?
Yeah. This could be a whole nother podcast.
It really could be.
About the quality and quantity of what we're consuming.
But we need to be aware of it, that literally 72% of adults spend their time on social media. That's a lot of time. Most of it is daily, and then weekly, and then less frequently, but almost all of it is daily. And an interesting point here, between the ages of 18 and 64, that age margin is narrowing between those who use it. Almost everyone is on social media evenly.
Yeah. We've seen that in the past decade.
Yeah.
I remember in junior high, I finally had permission to get a Facebook account. I was so excited. It was maybe a year where it was still cool for younger people to have one. And then in our high school days, gone. Now Facebook's, not trying to insult people. It's for older people now.
It is.
Generically speaking.
But it's still pretty high up there with the margin. We're looking at YouTube being the highest. That's at 81% of people use YouTube.
It deserves it.
Yeah, it does. It does. That's a good place. You learn on YouTube, right?
Yeah, and you might be watching us on YouTube
Facebook
right now.
follows numbers 2 at 69% social media, and there's a large gap between number 3, Instagram, 40%.
Instagram beat Twitter. That's a shame.
Instagram beat Twitter, and this is the percentage of U.S. adults who say they ever use blank.
So basically, most people are using social media.
Most people are using social media.
If you don't, good for you. I guess stop listening to the podcast if you don't.
I know.
If you don't.
That's Pew Research Center, by the way.
Yeah. We could do a whole, how much of it are we consuming? You could do the same thing with other things like news. Twitter's basically news today.
So much of that is just news. People get their news everywhere.
Yeah, what social media influencers, what content, what platforms are influencing us? I guess another way to put it in Bible terms would be, by whom are we being discipled by? Mm-hmm. A lot of people are being discipled by presidential candidates and news anchors and social media influencers. Now, there are some good Christian influences out there, perhaps on Facebook or YouTube. That'd be good. But a lot of it's not good. And that made me think of Philippians 4:8, which Paul says, hey, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's just, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. That's a good just entertainment verse across the board.
If you pull up a flashcard and you said, Facebook, what do you think of this? I would not have said true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, or commendable.
Yeah, I think of arguing. I think of insult.
Right.
I think of fake news, as the phrase goes around today. Yeah, I think of all that kind of stuff. Which also gets into a whole bunch of other things. This could lead into other topics about again, the content, the quality we're consuming. Matthew 5:29 says, "Hey, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away." I know some people who've just gotten rid of certain social media platforms. Some have even gotten rid of smartphones and stuff like that altogether.
And I think it's wise to do a fast every now and then. I mean, that seems to be a trend. Social media fast. Yeah, you get that.
No, I need to do that.
Keep yourself balanced. Yeah.
I need to do it.
Yeah, fast from Twitter.
Yeah, I need to. Yeah, I need to. It's been a while.
It has been. I've been pretty
I think
good.
the last time I did was Phil Robertson. I think he called for a social media fast.
He did, yeah. Yeah. It was a good episode, too, if you want.
Yeah, I need to do one. Thank you, George.
Right.
So let's get into that. Could be a whole nother podcast. The point is, everyone's using it. We need to ask the quality and the quantity. Where does it compare with our family time, our time of service toward others, our time of communication with God, our prayer and reading His Word?
Yeah, absolutely.
All that stuff. So let's get into the discussion, though, about if you're on social media and if we engage, meaning if you post something or put it on a story, another form of posting, or if you engage in the comment section, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, that's where stuff goes down, the comment sections.
That's kind of the trend that we're seeing, is the perception that we're giving off. What is our motive? And, why am I posting this? Asking why. I mean, one of a great book,
Heart
if you
question.
want to read it, is Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Start with why.
Start with why.
Yeah.
But that should be when we're posting, when we're doing something with our actions, we're starting with why, and we're asking ourselves, why are we doing this?
Yeah, where's our heart coming from?
Where's our heart coming from?
What's the motive?
Right.
Other questions we're going to look at is, hey, is this going to hurt someone else? Whether it's someone's feelings or all the way down to Romans 14, the conscience of our brothers and sisters. I guess overall you could just ask, what am I about to say or post? Is it helpful?
Yeah.
You want to read that passage, George? Philippians, go up right there. Philippians 2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others.
That includes what we do on our computer, on our phone.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Right. I think that's another problem with all this stuff, is we feel very far removed from the actual people.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about this before, which is, it's very easy for me to bash and demonize other people who think wildly different than I do, especially if I do not know them.
And that's a comedian said this. I'm not going to say which comedian. He said that's just talk. That's just all talk. And that's the social media is just full of talk. When you're out working with your coworker and your coworker's bashing a celebrity that he doesn't like, he would not say any of that to his face. He's just saying that in the comfort of his office because it's just talk.
Yeah.
And you think the same thing when you're on social media. It's just talk.
Yeah, so true.
And you got to be careful, because that could lead us down a very selfish spiral.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, these principles are going to apply to everything.
Right.
It's just we can't forget, since it can feel distant being, behind a smartphone, that we're called to be selfless there as well. Another big one we'll look at is it even true, as Trump popularized the phrase
True.
Fake news. Again, Philippians 4:8, whatever is true. Ultimately, right, the question for anything we do, including how we engage and what we post on social media, is this going to glorify God?
Right.
That's a question for, I guess, everything.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is.
I guess I'll start. You mentioned a lot more people use Instagram than Twitter.
More people use Instagram than
That's
Twitter.
surprising.
Yeah.
When I think of Instagram,
People like themselves better than they like their ideas.
Okay, I was going to ask, what do you think?
Let's be honest.
When I think of Instagram, I think of selfies. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with posting about, your vacation and selfies and things like that. Nothing wrong with that. But you can also go and tell on people's, whether it's Facebook, usually Instagram though, you can tell who loves me, myself, and I.
Oh, yeah.
There's a comedian. I'll say the comedian's name. He's relatively clean. Jim Gaffigan.
Okay.
He has a funny one. He talks about going to the gym, and he's like, "Why are there big mirrors in the gym?" He's like, "Some people like to look at themselves." He's like, "I want to look at something while I'm exercising, like myself," and it cracked me up.
That's exactly right.
But you can see those kind of people on social media, and especially Instagram.
It's all about self-branding these days. You are your own brand. Caleb Spear is his own brand.
Right.
And if you could work that up.
Right, if it's all about me.
Get that check mark, that blue check mark.
Oh, the blue check
mark. Yeah,
yes.
you're in some good status. It's true. Caleb Spear, the true.
The true one. Proverbs 16:5. Everyone who's arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished. We also we talked about, when we talked about the gentleman who talked with those, the black gentleman who talked with those in the KKK,
Yeah.
he felt bad for white supremacists, something I want to think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, he had empathy for him. We talked about that. Yeah.
Empathy is a big one here, which is, and this is sad, if all you're posting is about yourself and what you're doing and how you look, however that may be on social media, that's a very hollow and sad perception of self. If your value only comes from yourself, we talked about this, what happens when you fail, and we will fail, and what happens, when we feel sad, or, that's a sad place to get value from.
Oh, it is a sad place. I mean, I talk about this in my sermon Sunday, where this idea of glorifying yourself. We're not here to represent ourselves. We're just not.
Yep, we're representing someone else. We got a lot of passages to run through here. I think we'll just kind of go through these passages we thought of, and whatever topic it hits is kind of what topic it hits. Big deal. So Proverbs 20, verse 19, speaking about being selfish, says, whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with a simple babbler. Like you said, just talk.
Yeah.
What do you think of when you hear Proverbs 20:19?
I mean, I kind of hear this gossip idea.
Do people still gossip on social media?
Gossip girl.
Maybe in the DMs.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess in the DMs they do.
Maybe.
For sure they do.
Yeah. That's interesting, though. We think about not associating with someone. You think about Paul's things, like in 1 Cor 5, where it's like, if they're going to live in immorality and not repent, don't associate with them. Mm-hmm. And then here in Proverbs, it says, the simple babbler, don't associate with them.
Don't even associate with them.
That's crazy.
It could be dangerous. I never realized how bad gossip is till I went into my first full-time job, and you can see how gossip can corrupt other people's reputation. It can corrupt and really destroy when you don't have all the facts and you're just hammering down on this person. You're really nitpicking people down to a T, and that could be dangerous. Yeah, and we see that on social media with teens and just feeling bullied. It just leads to that.
In an environment where in the church where everyone knows a lot of people and know each other in the Lord's body, word gets around very quickly,
right,
for better and for worse.
Right.
Something to think about. All of this ultimately is going to come back to our motives. Paul says, let's pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. That's Romans 14, 19. Because what is ultimately our motive behind all of this?
Yeah, exactly. I wish I saw more of this on social media. Romans 14, verse 19.
Because ultimately, when it comes to glorifying God, we're hoping that we're either outright or at least giving opportunity to share good news of Jesus with those who don't have the good news, those who are lost. And that really makes me think of 2 Corinthians chapter 5. There's lots of verses in there. I can't read the whole thing, but there's a lot to look at.
Yes, 11, 14 through 15, 19 through 21. All of these have idea with the motives, but also with evangelism as well. Like I said, 80% of people are spending daily attention and time on social media.
Yeah, what a platform, an opportunity to say something.
Yeah, that's a huge impact you could have. Just pursuing, as I said in Romans, this idea of peace and mutual upbuilding, but also walking and glorifying Christ.
Yeah, Paul said we persuade others in 2 Cor 5:11 that in verse 14, the love of Christ controls us. Verse 15, saying that Jesus died for all, that those who might no longer live for themselves, this is what we're talking about, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. In verses 19 through 21, 2 Cor 5, that is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, right? Not counting our sins against us. But he entrusted to us, says Paul, the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ. You got to think of being an ambassador for the gospel when we're on social media. God's making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. there's a obvious clear motivation for evangelism. We're not saying everything you have to post has to be about that, right? Ultimately, you can thank God for your family by posting about that on Facebook.
Yeah.
But are you presenting something that's somewhat gospel oriented that allows people to see, oh, God is in their life, and that could potentially open up doors?
Is it pure, true, excellent? Worthy?
Yeah, Philippians 4:8.
Yeah.
Principle. How are we presenting ourselves to the world?
Right. Right. And if you want your kids dwelling on that, are you going to post that? That's kind of a good, good way to think about that.
That's definitely a good way to think about it. A lot of things go back to like Galatians 5. You think of the fruits of the Spirit. You want to read that passage?
It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law, and those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. I mean, how do we engage with people?
I have so many. Maybe this is a practical tip. It doesn't. Usually, I'm not one to comment on stuff on social media. Pretty real rare. A lot of times, when I want to comment on something, usually we want to comment when we strongly disagree. When we're like, oh man, that's wrong, and that can come from a good heart of, man, they're wrong about who God is or something like that. But a lot of the times, I'll type something out and then just delete it and just not say it. Sometimes it's kind of like the old adage of writing out a letter when you're really angry and then you just never send it.
I think that's really good. If we just wait, sometimes our anger will just kind of simmer down a little bit. It won't boil as much.
Yeah, not a lot of peace with that mindset. Fruit of the Spirit's patience.
Yeah.
Am I being kind?
And it's self-control too.
Yeah, all this wrapped up together. But the point there in Galatians 5:24 was we've been crucified ourselves, putting to death our passions and desires. But I really think the comment sections are perhaps where I see the most anger toward brothers and sisters in Christ and toward just any fellow, man out there. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only that's good for building up, as fits the occasion, then it may give grace to those who hear. That's Ephesians 4:29.
And we talked about in the episode with empathy how important private conversations with people are.
Yeah, and social media is kind of not that way. Again,
No.
unless you're in the DMs, but most of those arguments aren't.
And maybe it would be more beneficial to DM someone than it would be to
By the way,
post.
DM is direct message.
That's right.
For those of you
Just
who may not know.
privately direct message them.
Yeah. All of this gets back to a verse that's near and dear to my heart. I was talking with someone about it this week, Philippians 4:5. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand, a.k.a., right, the time is near for God in Christ to return.
Right.
This is the whole idea of we are ambassadors. We are representatives of Christ himself. And that, the last 2 years with race relations, COVID, sharp political divides, presidential election, riots and coups and all sorts of stuff, like, oh, man.
It's been pretty bad.
It's been rife with chaos, and it's been rife with, division on social media. And my question for us is, are we, as Christians generically, known for being reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why we did a whole podcast. So it was like, man, that was all over a year ago.
Was that 2020?
I'm thinking of the day when some of the people stormed the Capitol building.
Yeah, it's January 2020, right?
Yeah, January 6th, I think it's 21.
Oh, it's 21?
Yeah, it was 21, I think. And why we talked about
Yeah,
that
that's
was
probably
because
right,
those guys were waving flags with crosses on it and saying Jesus saves. And I was like, man, like generically they're representing Christianity.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're far from reasonable by going to violence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that should never be our number one.
And that's an extreme
motive.
example, but it happens in small ways in social media when our reaction is to just bite back and just be just so angry. Even if we're right about the topic, we can come across in such an awful way in an angry manner.
Right. I mean, anger can be pure in a sense, but it has to come from a righteous heart. If we're just angry at someone because of their stance and their perception they're bringing off, we're not being reasonable at all.
No. And speaking of anger, you want to read 1 Timothy 2, 8 through 10?
It says, I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. Likewise also that women should adorn themselves in a respectable apparel with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works.
So men, in whatever the situation that Paul and Timothy are dealing with, likely in Ephesus, are angry, they're quarreling. Instead, he says pray. If you didn't listen to it, last week we talked about praying and communicating with our God. And that the women, thinking about modesty. Now, this also gets back to maybe the Instagram life of what do we post on Facebook and Instagram. Again, nothing wrong posting about your vacation or something that happened in your school or with your family. Cool. Right. Those are good gifts from God. We can honor God in such a way by talking about those things. But usually I think, especially in church, Christian circles, people hear modesty and they think about how much skin am I showing, which make no mistake. There are places where the Bible will talk about that.
Yeah.
This is actually not one of them. Where does it say here? Not with braided hair, gold, pearls, or costly attire. For them, with such a culture of classes, I think we're talking about status and not flaunting your wealth. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's something we don't talk about a lot when it comes to posting on social media.
No, we don't. No, we always think of modesty as what we wear, how much skin we show, like you're saying. We think of purity as being just sexual, when really purity should be a lifestyle. It should be our entire life. And modesty comes into this aspect as well with, we may be more fortunate than others. How are they going to feel about some of the things that I post? Because when I post something, it doesn't tell the whole story, right? It rarely tells a whole story. And so it only tells, it's the good stuff, right? It's usually, the highlights. Yeah. And so you actually bring people down. You could bring people down if you're not careful.
Yeah, you can be a little tone deaf, so to say.
Social media is tone deaf.
It is tone deaf. There could be a huge event in the world or just in your local community or local church, and someone's really struggling, bad things are happening, and you're like, check this nice new car out or whatnot. Like, those seem small, but they add up to where people are asking, are you just about yourself? Are you flaunting the good things that have been given to your life? And speaking of flaunting, it makes me think when Jesus said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. That's another thing on sometimes Christian social media where people go to, Skid Row in LA and, they're handing out $100 bills and posting it. It's like, all right, like, okay, that's up to your conscience and whatnot. But
right.
Again, what's our motive with what we're posting? I guess that's the name of the game.
Yeah, that's what it really goes back to, is what is our motive.
Yeah. But also, I know 1 Timothy 2 is not talking about how much skin we show, but Paul tells Timothy, flee, run away, get away from sexual immorality, which, again, could be a whole nother podcast. What are we consuming on social media? But the other thing is also what we're posting. Got to consider about that, too. Am I going to cause other people to stumble or hurt my brother's conscience between the wealth or skin that I'm showing out there? That's a huge one. Again, it's just coming back to, am I being considerate of others?
Considerate and loving of other people. Am I showing empathy? Social media would look a whole lot different if we just had a little more love.
Yeah. It's also interesting that the qualifications and qualities for elders mentioned, 1 Timothy 3:7, he must be thought well of by outsiders. He may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. Even when we're looking at the leaders of churches for shepherds, other people got to think highly of them as a respectable person. And in being respectable, we got to be interested in telling the truth. Capital T truth, the gospel, Jesus. But that also includes, everything.
That includes everything. We have a duty to be honest, not tell people lies, and that includes the information that we share with people as well. We got to be honest with that thing. We have to do some more work. We have to dig. Is this factual? Because I am posting this. Everyone's a journalist in a sense nowadays when they're posting certain things like that. And so we gotta do the work to be honest with people with the information that we post.
Yeah, 1 Timothy 4:7 states, have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for godliness. For Timothy, that include lots of things within the church, outside of the church, with different cults and ideas. And the resurrection already happened and stuff like that they're dealing with. But, man, that includes just everything in principle with
Right.
It was funny because as a kid growing up, I was told wisely by my parents, don't believe everything you see or read on the internet. And now I feel like largely, maybe it's because people don't know sources, but a lot of people, they just take it wholesale and share it, repost it, talk about it as if
Someone posted it has to be true.
Right.
Yeah.
I see this shamelessly with political party lines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, shameless. If it
is.
fits what you want, what you think, your opinion, your narrative, it must be true. And there's so many times where I've seen Christians share stuff from just unreliable sources, which unfortunately sometimes come from even leaders in this day and age on both sides all the time. We should be interested in telling the truth,
Right?
on any subject, which again goes back to our witness. Like if you're just twisting words and facts, you're lying.
Right.
What kind of witness is that for the gospel?
If we're to walk in the way of truth, we should be speaking the truth as well. I think the rest of it should follow, the minute things, the information that we share with people, the things that we post. We should be honest with people. In a sense, we should do the due diligence that other people aren't doing and be different.
Yeah, the whole fake news thing is true.
Right.
You watch CNN, you watch Fox. They're going to have their narrative and they're going to twist things at least. And there's sometimes where I've seen where straight up people are basically lying.
Right.
And it's just like, guys, I don't care if it's going to give you the end result you think that you really want or whatnot. We can't be involved with that. You got to call a spade in kind ways and responsible ways, but we should be interested in truth. And as older people wisely have told me, take your own advice. Sometimes I would say to that older generation, don't believe everything you see on the internet. We should be interested in truth. That's a tough one.
It is a tough one for people to swallow. I think it would go a long way, especially in the divisions that we're seeing today.
Yeah. You want to read Titus 3, verses 1 and 2?
Remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy toward all people. There's the idea of gentleness again.
That last line gets me. Paul tells Titus, show perfect courtesy toward all people.
Perfect.
Yeah, good luck. All people, though. That's not just the Christians. That's the Jewish leaders who hate you, claiming Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. That's the Romans who are like, you have to worship these other gods. And you're like, nope, we worship one God. Mm-hmm. And they're like, So, and he says,
there's a lot of division there. And he's saying, avoid quarreling and every good work.
And treat even your enemies is what he's saying with courtesy.
Yes.
Which means when we post, I get it. There's nothing wrong with joking. Jesus tells jokes, believe it or not, in the Bible. Even some marriage jokes, and but we got to be considerate. Like, where am I saying this joke? Again, there's very different between public and private spheres, right? You and I, George, could joke about something privately, and publicly, I may accidentally hurt someone's feelings or whatnot. Again, we got to consider, our witness.
Yep.
Our witness. So if I'm posting online just making fun of my brother or sister or political leaders or whatnot, and that's like what my social media is dedicated to, I don't know what I'm communicating other than I'm really riled. I don't know. I don't get it. We're just creating more barriers to get to people.
We are. We got to be aware of our situation, our audience, and adjust appropriately, adjust in a godly way.
Yeah, and that's not saying we can't critique our leaders. It happens in the Bible. I'm saying how we do it.
Right.
That's all we're talking about. All right, that's why James 1:19 famously says this, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And James is dealing with the church, how they're treating each other, how outsiders are treating them and viewing them. Most of the time, our immediate reaction of anger is not righteous. Sometimes we can even twist our anger over righteous things we should be righteously angry about and turn it into
we should.
Like vengeance, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And that made me think of actually Peter in the garden. Like,
oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah, there seemed to be good motive out of that.
I'm gonna protect my rabbi.
Yeah,
my
I love
Lord.
him. Right.
I love him. I'm not gonna have him be arrested. And yeah, Peter was he was willing to kill for Jesus. Mm-hmm. But what was he not willing to do that night?
Well, he wasn't willing to sacrifice as well. He wasn't willing to take the cup.
Yeah, he was not willing to die with him and for him, right. Was he? Do you know this man? I don't know who you're talking about. No, I know who you're talking about. You're a Galilean. Your accent's giving you away. Yeah. We need to save that clip of the rooster. Right, in the rooster crows, you said you're going to deny me. And as you know, you read church history, you read the end of John, what kind of death Peter would die to glorify God.
Yeah, that's true.
When Peter understood the gospel and what Jesus had done, then Peter was willing to die himself, literally. I mean,
same passage, right? Tend my sheep, feed my lambs.
Yeah, feed my lambs. And Peter had maybe the right idea of, hey, right. I want to protect my friend here, but really it ultimately was out of selfish motives. And
right.
Yeah. So sometimes we just want to kill others thinking, oh, this is the righteous thing to do here. And it's like, yeah, no, probably not. Probably the call, right? The call of the cross is to die to ourselves. And Peter learned that in a really hard way.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Peter's very interesting.
He is very interesting.
Well, I guess let's wrap this up. George, how do we wrap this up into just applicability, faith in action?
There's a few things here. I mean, the classic, think before you speak, think before you post, right? Is this going to glorify God?
Yeah,
is it coming from a motive? Is it a good, pure motive? My intention's pure? Is my heart, wanting to do what is right as well? And those, I think, should be very applicable in this sense. Be considerate of others, even online, even though you can't see them. Practice those things as well.
Yeah, we're going to hurt others.
I mean, we like to really get really mad in the car all the time. Road rage, you hear it all the time because it's a stressful environment. We don't know this person, so we'll just, we'll get really angry at that point, which we don't. If we can dial that down as well, and we can dial down social media, we need to start seeing people even though they're distant as if they're close. It's just our world today. And really, really showing the love of God. Also, that's a huge audience that people have online. Really try to work to evangelize and take the moment to show them how amazing God is, how he's changed your own life and things like that.
Right.
Make it about Jesus as well. And I think today, this is one of the things that makes me kind of angry is we're just down in our phones all the time. Yeah. We are on social media. We create this reality around our screens, which isn't true, and it's just a bunch of fantasies, and we don't take the time to really appreciate what God has done, everything he's created, the beautiful people he's created around us, and have conversations with them as well. And I think if we can have good conversations with people outside of social media, we should be able to reflect that inside as well.
Amen. Yep. These are all very important questions to ask with our motive. Is it selfless? Am I going to hurt someone else? Am I going to hurt my brother's conscience?
Yeah.
Romans 14, got to consider that. Is it even true? We should be interested in the truth, guys. And ultimately, the big one is it going to glorify God? Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, sitting on your phone, do all to the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31, which actually is tied in with evangelism. Give no offense to Jews or Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone, says Paul, in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage. I know as Americans, we're big into our rights. Paul's like, I gave up my rights as a Jewish person. I gave up my rights as a Roman citizen, as someone freed from he always did that. He says, not seeking my own advantage, that of many they may be saved. And then he says, be imitators of me,
That's right.
as I am
That's
of
right.
Christ.
I don't know, man. I think that's a wrap.
You think that's a wrap? All right.
That's a wrap.
I guess that's a wrap, guys. Thanks for listening. Be considerate of how we represent Christ out there on social media.
Go so.